Hello and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel. And today I am very excited because I have Darrelyn Gunzburg with me, who has written this very interesting and I feel inspiring book, Astrographology. Darrelyn, the minute I saw the title, I thought, oh, I have to have you on.
Oh, bless you, Anna. Well, it's lovely to be here always.
It's been a while since we spoke, because the last time we spoke, we were discussing your book, The Very Personal Matter of Grief, if I remember the title correctly.
Yes, Grief, a Dark Sacred Time.
A Dark Sacred Time, that's it.
Yeah.
And it was just such a profound book. I loved that, as I love this. So let's talk about this.
Okay, good.
So first of all, I think it might be good to talk about handwriting, because you say some things about handwriting in your book that made me just go, wow, I've never thought of that before. So tell us about handwriting and how you see it.
Well, it's such a strange subject to write about now, particularly when I did it, which is 2009. I mean, historically, when I started looking at this, I had clients who were writing into me, sending a deposit, a check, old-fashioned technology, a check. And they would put a note with it because I would ask for a deposit for their consultation. And that was the days when we were doing face-to-face consultations. And I was doing, a lot at the time. And so I was getting people who wouldn't necessarily show up. And so I would ask for a deposit beforehand. And they would often put a note with it. And I started to think to myself, do you know what? They're telling me something with their handwriting when they send that note in. And I've always been of the understanding that, when you stand in front of a piece of art, you suddenly get a hit from it. Even if you've seen it in reproduction, you get a different response. You're actually communicating with the artist because you're seeing their brush strokes, you're seeing the way that they turn their hand as they do something, and you're also getting their selection of color. So there's a lot of information that we're getting from a piece of art when we stand in front of it that we don't get when we just look at it in a book. And I suddenly realized that what I was getting with these precious pieces of handwriting was the same thing. People were communicating something to me through the emotion that they were using as they were writing their handwriting, making the strokes. And I thought, wow, this could be a bridge into why they're coming to see me, because I'm sure, as you know, once someone sits in front of you and they say, oh, well, I'm interested in a new job, and then you start talking with them, and it's not about that at all. There's a much deeper issue. And I thought, if I can correlate the two, then I can work my way into the heart of the matter much more quickly, because then I've got a correlation, a bridge between two systems that are telling me about the I want to say unexpurgated, but I mean undealt with emotional issues. Yes. So
it's I'm just thinking about so many things all at the same time, and I'm thinking about handwriting of friends that in cards, and how some of it is very easy to read, others not so easy. It takes a little bit of deciphering.
Yes.
And I'm also thinking about how we use handwriting now, because so much of our writing is typed. And there was a period in which I actually rarely wrote. And then I realized that I am much more creative if I handwrite, and also I remember better if I handwrite.
Mm.
So it's kind of returned, so that I am, when I'm formulating ideas for talks, workshops, anything, right? Not so much writing that is already formed in my head, because in terms of writing articles, etc., it's in my head before it goes to paper. So It's already there, and then it's just a matter of typing it, and it makes it much easier for editing. So that's still there. But just the formulation of ideas, when I'm putting together the structure of the talk, the structure of the article, that's always handwritten, because there's something about creativity and actually the physical element of writing that is very connected for me. And equally, if I'm in a class and I'm wanting to take notes, it's not going to go. It would be so convenient to just type it into my notes on my phone, but I know I don't remember it as well.
Interesting. Yes. And that's exactly what I understand about handwriting. There's something that happens between the hand and the brain when you write, and you're much more in control about what you're gathering together. And you may find that you're also sort of putting arrows between thoughts or ideas, or writing in different colors to make it stand out. And that's making it go in deeper. It's a different way of organizing the information, which is much more potent and creative.
There is definitely a link between handwriting and the brain, because when I was a teacher and we wanted to help children improve their handwriting, we were getting them to do exercises to improve the neural connectivity in the brain, to improve their handwriting. Very specifically, exercises that involved coordination, just this kind of thing and this kind of thing, and that was helping their handwriting improve. So there is definitely a link between the neural pathways beyond the fact that the brain sends an impulse, and we move. Something else that's going on there about connection between the two hemispheres of the brain.
Yes. Interesting, isn't it?
So the other thing that really got me thinking, actually, is that you talk about handwriting as a means of co-creation. And you then go on to talk about it from a very ancient perspective. And that made my heart skip a beat, because it was just, I thought, of course. So tell us.
Well, there's sort of, people think that graphology is something relatively new. And indeed, we're looking at something that has been formulated, structured into rules and regulations in the 1600s. And something very interesting happens in the 1600s. I've seen it across the board in various subjects, is that people are starting to move away from this more organic, wet way of looking at the world into something that's much more structured and focused and linear. And the same happens with graphology. It gets shaped into rules and regulations, so that now when you go to do a graphology course, I understand, I haven't done one, but it's apparently there are certain points that you look for, and you add up these points, and then you get a character analysis. And that, Anna, is just a way of boxing people in. It's a linear, formulaic way of doing it. And we know from astrology that people are not linear and formulaic. So I started to hunt back into historically what was going on, and I found the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a very ancient Kabbalistic, it's the spiritual side of Judaism, which is held into how we can, if you like, from a rabbinic point of view, how we can touch the face of God. And it's held within this idea that the letters are potent and they hold spiritual value. They hold it through writing it, carving it, meditating on it, and then speaking it. And these three things go together to allow, or it's really just a meditational process. If we strip away all the patriarchal appurtenances, it's really this are similar to focusing on a point, breathing, and then allowing yourself to come into the present. It's the same process. And then we have the idea that the stars are the writings of heaven. They're the way that God communicates to us. This comes from the Mesopotamian philosophy. So if you have stars that are the writings that God is using to communicate to us, and you have the idea that you can actually write yourself and marry, and you can then touch the mind of God. I'm using God just because that's what's come down to us. You can substitute, anyone who's listening can substitute what they wish. If you can touch the mind of God through the stars, and you can meditate on the letters that you write, then if one is the heavenly writing, then surely we should be able to marry the two together. And as astrologers, the heavenly writing is the astrology, how we take the star patterns of a certain time and moment, and we analyze that. And so therefore, the person who is embodying that particular chart at that moment in time surely has a way of being able to meditate on the letters that they're writing. The Sefer Yetzirah talks about these as pathways. They don't use the Hebrew word derech, which is a normal road. They use the word netivot, which is the hidden pathway, paths you don't see until you start walking the path. You know, there's always a hidden agenda with these things. Nothing is easy. And I thought if people can actually look at what they're writing and marry it with what's in their chart to be able to develop parts of themselves, then by changing one, you've got a way of working with the transits and the progressions that are current for you to be able to shape them into the best possible way. I mean, nothing is written in stone, but it is determined in terms of the time, date, and place that you're born. But the handwriting is something you can change. You know, with clients, you say, well, here's a transit, and let's say it's a Saturn-Sun transit, and there's going to be, you know, best case scenario is you will be able to take responsibility in this way. Worst case scenario is you will feel pressured and under the thumb and really angry that you have to do something. And there's always that bell curve in between. And if you can say to someone, this is the bell curve, this is the nature of your Saturn and when it reaches your sun. But if you take responsibility, how can you use a letter to show yourself starting to take responsibility? And that will start to ease that transit into a more positive expression, something you want to do, not something you feel you have to do, or that's battering you down or leveling you to the ground so you just feel life is not worth living. So yeah, there were a lot of different philosophies that started to come together in my head, and I could see how it was a useful tool for working with clients.
Just sticking with the ancient world for a bit. What is the connection then between handwriting as a kind of sacred process and runes?
Oh, I honestly can't answer you because I don't work with the runes.
Because I just thought, but that's also something that's got a sacred element to it.
Yes.
And I just had this notion, because we know that in terms of speech, that sounds were sacred.
Yes.
And so the name of God became sacred because there were certain sounds that were put together to almost be an invocation spell, or actually to be an invocation spell. And so on it goes. So I was thinking about how those sounds were translated into writing, and then you talking about, you know, a line as well, and it just got me thinking about runes. But I think that's something that we're going to have to explore.
I think it's something you need to explore.
Exactly.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Another way of pathways open up.
About it. Yes. So then let's come back to the chart. And I love the idea that the chart is God's handwriting, in a sense, his or her little note to us to say, hey, this is who you are, and here are some paths that you might want to explore while you're here. You've forgotten who you are, you've forgotten where you're from, but here it is, a little reminder to help you, you know. So I just love that. So if we're looking at a chart, are there certain themes or patterns that might help us to guess as to the type of handwriting we can expect?
Yes, I think so, but they're specific to the person, really. I mean, if you're looking at a heavy 12th house, I think you're looking for things that are hidden because they're family issues that don't necessarily get aired. If you're looking at 8th house, then there's going to be an intensity of focus around either trauma or drama or change in some way. So, you know, everything you know about a chart, you can extract the issues you think you're going to be seeing and think about how that might represent itself in the handwriting. And so, you know, if it's the 12th house, there might be loops or containers because they hide things. Where's the person hiding from themselves? Where is the person feeling that they have to give too much to a family rather than to themselves? Where are they stifling their creativity? So everything you know about a chart and you see in a client's issues, and there's usually, I think there's usually about 3 to 5 issues that they're dealing with. It's about all we can handle it across our life. And just seeing which ones are popping out through the handwriting, I think it's very clear to see that. But sometimes clients surprise you. You think they're not going to be handling this, and they're handling it brilliantly, and you think, oh, I didn't see that one there. So it gives you a shortcut into seeing what it is they might be trying to deal with.
That's interesting. And I was just thinking, because just at the moment, the only handwriting that I'm familiar with from memory is my own. And so I'm just thinking about how, as a child, I really used to grip my pen very, very hard. And I'm thinking back to why I would have done that. And subsequently, as a teacher, seeing other children do exactly that, you know, that real tight grip. And I think for me, it was, I didn't want to lose control and make a mistake, because I knew if I did, I'd have to redo it. And, you know, I've got enough Gemini to not want to redo anything. So it's done. So there was this really strong grip on the pen, and tiny writing as well, which I don't know about you, but to me, it was an expression of perhaps not wanting to be seen too much, you know, and definitely that fear of being criticized or having to redo the whole thing. So just tiny, I think, looking back at it, because I am Portuguese, and at the time in the Portuguese school that I went to, yes, you did have to redo everything if you made a mistake. And I was very young. I would have been at about 5 years old, and expected to do fluid writing. And not only fluid writing, but without any mistakes. So this was cursive writing, neat, perfect. It had to, heaven forbid you made a spelling mistake, because you'd be starting the whole thing all over again. So my dislike of editing goes back to those days, I think. And I look back, because I have recently come across, they called them tests, you know, but they were very formal. You dressed up for the day that you had your test. And, you know, it was a very formal thing at the age of 5. So now that's the context of the handwriting. And looking back, I can see why my writing was the way it was and what I was doing. If I take it back to my chart, I have a Virgo ascendant.
Yes, I was going to say there's a real focus on Virgo perfection, but also that small writing, and it doesn't necessarily mean trying to get it right. It means focusing your attention on the detail, and so making it small and distilling your thinking and your ideas. So it's not necessarily a negative. It can be a positive, particularly if you say you've got a lot of Gemini in your chart. It's a way of bringing all those disparate elements together. So you may be a bit hard on yourself, but then how can you not be when you're a child, because you're looking
Absolutely.
for validation from a teacher. Yeah.
And just the dread of having to do the whole thing all over again. I was just
Poor Anna. Oh no. Oh.
And I look, and it's so different now.
Yes.
It's so different. It is, my writing now is very fluid, in the sense that it's not contained like that. And I have to sometimes be careful that I don't skip words. I've noticed of late, I can actually skip words. I've thought it, but I haven't written it. And I think, oh, there's a word missing here. What happened? Very interesting, because it's like, as an adult, I have the freedom that I didn't have as a child. And I would say my writing now is probably very Gemini. And my handwriting is much more Gemini than when I was a child, which I think was probably quite Virgo.
Well, how wonderful, though, that you can see the changes. I have seen some adults who are still writing like children.
Yeah.
Printing. So in other words, they want to stay like that. They don't want to change. Fear of change. I think we need to see the change in our writing. And you know, often you can see you do something quickly. You scroll a shopping list or whatever. And then you write a card to a friend, and they're quite different, because we're in different modalities, and different parts of our charter are taking control at the time.
I love the idea that by attending to our handwriting, we can be changing ourselves. And it actually makes me think of the interview I did with Bernadette Brady about chaos theory and astrology and the idea of co-creation. And she talked about how you could just change one thing, like which wrist you wear your watch on, and that can set up a chain of events of change.
Yes.
You're wanting something to change, but you're not sure what, and you just make one little change, and then suddenly everything comes to answer. So now you're talking about it in terms of handwriting. So tell us a little bit more. Flush that out a little bit for us.
Well, it fits into the same system, and she'll be thrilled that you remember about changing the watch. So when I work with clients, I say to them, I ask them to send me some handwriting if they're having a difficult time. And then I look at it and talk about the different things that could be changed to help them. But I say, don't do it all at once, because it implodes, it collapses, and it goes nowhere. So you have to start off with just one small thing, one small tiny thing. You know, it might be making the first letter in a line bigger to give the person confidence, or it might be stretching a letter that has an ascender or a loop that goes upwards, making that bigger so that they're reaching for their own dreams. And just to keep doing that and watch what happens. And there's no time scale on this, just to keep doing it, watching what happens, keep doing it. And then when they feel that whatever it is wants to come into their life, or they're able to step forward on that path, then they can make the next change. So it is a slow, gradual process, but, you know, transits often last 9 months. So I say to them, or longer. Yes, I know, if you're unlucky. So they've got time. They've got time.
I was just thinking about why this would be. So we can talk about it in the more esoteric sense of just like of chaos theory. You're intending to change, and then the world comes to meet your, or the universe comes to meet your intention to change. But I think there's something else here too, and that's about intention.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
There's that focus of intention. I'm going to just change this in my handwriting. And that is like a rehearsal, like a visualization of that change that's happening. Because the reason I'm making this particular change, small though it be, when I'm writing, is because I have an intention to change something about myself. And now every time I do this, I am repeating that intention to myself. It becomes an affirmation, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It's a visual affirmation. But also it's a physical thing too, because you're changing it in your body. And so you get body memory that changes it. And that's going to ricochet across your whole body physically, because we're a complete network, not just isolated. And then it ricochets across your emotional network and your spiritual network. And so gradually you start to see, when you look back, oh, I acted that way in that situation instead of this way. And so you get the results.
I just this image of how when we're doing that with our handwriting, it made me think about carving into stone, and how we're actually carving this into our brain.
Yes.
And that's because
Nice.
we are creating new neural pathways.
Mm.
Whenever we do anything that is rehearsed and new, it's a new neural pathway. And I think here, and this is with my hypnotherapist hat on, when we are, the reason hypnosis is such a potent method for creating new neural pathways is because in hypnosis, we are in an extremely relaxed state, although the mind is still alert. It's the combination of relaxed and alert, because that means that the brain is making connections more readily. And so whatever we're doing there can become, in that state, is a rehearsal of visualization. So for instance, in a typical session, which is 2 hours long, I will have helped my clients go back to deal with whatever the issue is that we intend to look at. So we follow the path of the feeling that we're wanting to understand and resolve to its initial incident. And then we begin to bring in new information so that the person can make different connections and gain different understandings and resolve whatever the internal conflict or issue is. But afterwards, and this is the bit that's relevant, is that at the end of this, towards the end of the session in hypnosis, I will be using visual imagery to reinforce whatever has just happened in the session, whatever the positive takeaway, if I can put it that way. And I record it so that the person can take that bit away and rehearse the new way of being. But there are other ways of doing this that are physical. So physical movement is also a rehearsal, and it takes me back to the children doing their physical exercises.
Yes.
To build the different neural pathways to improve their handwriting. So if you're wanting to change and you are making a small change in your handwriting, because you have that intention, and also, you know, when you're writing, you can be really relaxed when you're writing, can't you? I think there's something that's hypnotic about the act of handwriting. And so I think you're kind of tapping into potentially that hypnotic state. And then as you do this, you're practicing all the time. It's like that act of visualization of your intention. So this is a very long-winded way of making sense of why this would be.
Yes, yes, yes. I think you're right, absolutely right. It's replacing something much more positive with something that's been anchored in a negative way. And it takes time. It takes time to do that. With your hypnotherapy sessions, do you have follow-up sessions with the clients?
Always.
Yeah,
always.
yeah. And roughly, Anna, how long would it take for someone to feel that the new pathway is actually working for them?
So the received wisdom is that it's about 28 days.
Right,
And
yes.
typically I see my clients once a month, unless there is a great need to do more than that. But it, depending on the complexity of the issue, what happens is that we begin to see change, but of course that change opens the door to see something that we have missed. So this is a process. It's not a one session only. It's a process. However, here's the thing that I find fascinating, is that very often when we're following up at the beginning of a session as to what happened in the previous session, they can't remember having ever felt what brought them to me in the first place.
Wow, that's powerful. Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, that is, well, no, that's changed, but you know, we need to look at this now, because
Yes.
Multifaceted. So we
Yes.
looked at one aspect, resolved it to the point where, oh yeah, I did used to feel like that, and they've forgotten. So it's a very interesting thing, and I think, and that's why I'm quite excited about, you know, this notion of changing one aspect, because yes, there is the more metaphysical, co-creative aspect to it, but there's something else going on as well at a very physical level too.
Yes, yes. I always tell my clients it takes 30 days to change a habit. It's the same as what you're saying. The received wisdom is 28 days. And I say to them, be careful, because as you open that door, things will emerge and you need time to just process that. So in a way, what they're doing with this process is they're doing it more, if I can use the term, consciously than maybe in the hypnotherapy session. So they're getting a chance to look at it as it comes out. I think knowing that the transit is long and knowing that they've got at least 9 months to deal with it, it gives them a bit of breathing space, not to rush things, to start to just gently change that pathway.
Absolutely. And it's, you know, that's a new habit.
It's new habits, yeah.
When you're changing your handwriting becomes habitual, doesn't it?
It does,
So
yes.
it's a habit. So if you're changing one aspect of your handwriting, you are changing a habit. And again, that takes us back to creating new neural pathways.
Yes, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because some things you need to be routine. You need to just be able to know you can get in the car and drive it. You don't have to keep thinking about it. But if you start to find that you're driving haphazardly, then you need to look at it. So there are paths that are good and positive and take you somewhere. They lead somewhere, and others that are, they've got holes in them and you fall down them and it's not good.
Absolutely. And there are times when it is time to reassess and think. We have to, there are some things we best not think about. Walking downstairs, I'm sure that you've had the experience of you're walking downstairs and suddenly you're aware that you're walking, and you almost fall because you've interrupted the automatic going down the stairs. And so suddenly it's like, oh, where do I put my foot next, you know? And it's, so some things you want to kind of have automated.
Yes.
And it's best not to think too much about them unless necessary.
Yes.
But there are other things that require our attention, and that there we definitely need to look and then change.
I think when the client contacts you, that tells you that this is the time when they're ready for change. Otherwise, they wouldn't be contacting you. And so it's a very potent time when you can actually help them to make that change. And it's lovely when you see them come back and they've made those changes, or they tell you such and such worked, or, you know, this evolved in the way I wanted it to. Yeah.
And the transits, of course, are the signatures, the messages that are saying time to change.
Yes.
You know that thing you've been neglecting? Time to have a look.
Yes.
No longer on automated, format.
No, that's right. And the lovely thing is that I can look at my handwriting and look at it and think, what are you doing that for? What's going on there? Oh, okay. So you sort of get into a new habit of being careful about what it is you're doing. You can pick it up as you go, and that's very empowering.
And you know what you just said there has made me think about dreams, because dreams are messages from the unconscious.
Yeah.
They're
Yes.
telling us, you're not really happy about this particular situation. Once you've been able to decipher what the dream was, this situation is not something you're not happy about, and you haven't been acknowledging you're not happy about it. So I'm here to tell you that. And now your handwriting could be doing exactly the same thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Darrelyn, thank you so much for your book and your time today and the conversation.
My pleasure. It's always a delight to talk to you, Anna. Thank you. Thank you for making the space available for this, because a lot of people think, I don't handwrite, I don't need that. But the thing is, if you actually consciously bring it in as a tool, you can find out how powerful it is.
Well, my word of advice to those who say they don't handwrite anymore, it's time to start.
Yes.
You're missing a trick.
Yes.
So, and to help you, here it is, Astrographology. And I will be putting a link to the book on the description box. So tell me how people can find you if they want to.
They can, yes, they can go to Astrologos and they can look across the top menu. That's astrologos.co.uk. They can go along the top menu and they'll see consultations.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Darrelyn.
My pleasure, Anna. Thank you.
And thank you all for watching. Now, next time, we're going to be calling down the gods. Until then, have a great week and goodbye.
Bye-bye, everyone.